There is a moment that almost every person who grew up in a baby boomer household can picture without trying. The table is set, the food is hot, everyone has found their seat, the children are already reaching for the bread, the husband has unfolded his napkin, the guests are mid-conversation, and she, or sometimes he, is still moving, still carrying, still adjusting something on the counter, refilling a glass, checking on something in the kitchen that probably does not need checking on anymore. And then finally, when everything is settled and everyone else is already eating, they sit down. Last, always last. If you grew up watching this happen, you accepted it as the natural order of things. If you were the one doing it, you probably never thought of it as a choice. It simply was what it was. Your seat was always the last one filled because everything else had to be handled first. But here is what that quiet, ordinary moment actually contains. It is not just a habit formed around a dinner table. It is the visible surface of something that runs far deeper, a pattern that shaped how an entire generation understood their own place in the world, not just at the table, everywhere. This video is about that pattern, where it came from, what it gave, what it quietly took away, and why so many baby boomers are living with its weight today, often without a name for what they are carrying. To understand this, you have to go back, not to the dinner table specifically, but to the world that produced it. If you were born between 1946 and 1964, the household you grew up in had a logic to it. Roles were not discussed, they were inherited. In many American families of that era, mothers cooked, cleaned, managed, organized, and absorbed. Fathers worked, provided, fixed, and carried the financial weight of the family with very little acknowledgement that it was heavy. Children watched all of this and absorbed a lesson that was never spoken out loud, but taught every single day. The needs of the family come before the needs of the individual, and the needs of the adults who kept everything running came last of all. This was not framed as sacrifice. It was framed as simply how decent adults behaved. You took care of what needed taking care of. You made sure everyone else was settled. And if there was anything left over, time, food, rest, attention, perhaps you allowed yourself a small portion of it. In many households, economic pressure deepened this further. Tight margins meant that wasting anything, food, money, time, energy, felt genuinely dangerous. Your own comfort was the last item on a list that rarely reached its end. A generation absorbed this as a definition rather than a rule. This is what a responsible person does. By the time those children became adults themselves, the pattern was not something they chose. It was something they were. What does this look like from the outside? It looks like strength. It looks like the kind of quiet, uncomplaining competence that holds families and workplaces together. And it is those things. That part is entirely real. The baby boomer who is always the last to sit down, who handles every problem before mentioning it, was a problem, who says I'm fine before anyone asks. That person is genuinely capable, genuinely reliable, the kind of person others lean on without fully understanding how much weight they are placing on a single set of shoulders. The people around them speak with admiration. She always holds everything together. He never complains. You can always count on them. What almost no one says is, I wonder what they actually need. Not because the people around them do not care, but because the signal was never sent. And after enough years of this, people stop thinking to ask. The strength becomes invisible. Precisely because it is so consistent, it disappears into the background of daily life, the way a load-bearing wall disappears into a house, present everywhere, noticed only when something goes wrong. The competence made them indispensable. It also made them invisible. What the outside view misses is how this pattern was built. It did not arrive through a single decision. It arrived through thousands of small moments, each teaching the same quiet lesson. Your needs come second, not last, just second, which sounds manageable until you realize the first list never ends. A child who watches her mother eat the smallest portion at every meal, who watches her father skip lunch to fix something that needs fixing, who hears directly or indirectly that asking for help is a burden, that real strength means absorbing discomfort without comment. The child learns something more durable than a habit. They learn to place their needs at the end of the list. Then they learn to make the list so long that the end never arrives. Here is why that matters. A person who believes their needs do not matter can over time begin to question that belief. But a person whose entire sense of self is built around being the capable one, the reliable one, the one who handles it, that person faces a harder reckoning. Stopping would mean becoming someone their whole life had taught them not to be. The behavior became a value, and values do not give way easily. Consider how far beyond the dinner table this reaches. The baby boomer, who is always last to sit down, is also the one who schedules a doctor's appointment and quietly cancels it when something else comes up. Who is exhausted but does not mention it because everyone around them seems more exhausted. Who answers, "How are you?" with "fine," so automatically that sometimes they forget to check whether it is true. They are the one who at a family gathering drifts back to the kitchen while others are still talking. Who starts clearing dishes before the conversation is finished. Who finds a task whenever stillness is available, because sitting without purpose feels like something that has not yet been earned. And when their adult children offer to help, they say, "No, no, I've got it," meaning it, and not quite meaning it at the same time. Somewhere beneath that refusal is a quieter truth they have not found words for. It is that accepting help requires admitting they need it. And needing something openly, without apology, sits uncomfortably against an identity built on never needing anything at all. So they keep moving, keep managing, keep being the last one to sit down. For decades, this pattern gave them something real. It made them the person everyone needed. Being needed is not a small thing. For many people it is one of the most durable sources of meaning there is. The parent who is always present, always capable, always managing, that parent is loved in a particular and powerful way. The colleague who never drops a responsibility, that person is valued in a way that feels solid and reliable. The contribution was genuine, the love behind it was genuine, the competence was earned. But when a person's sense of self rests almost entirely on what they do for others, something shifts when that doing is no longer needed at the same level. What happens when the children build their own lives, their own routines, their own tables, when the career ends, when the house is quieter and the list of urgent things grows shorter, and the person who defined themselves by that list suddenly has more time than they have ever had and does not quite know what to do with themselves inside it? The person who was always last to sit down finds themselves at a much smaller table, and the silence where the busyness used to be is not restful. It is disorienting in a way that is genuinely hard to name. This is the cost, and it goes largely unacknowledged because from the outside everything still looks fine. The pattern is now so automatic, it runs without anyone to serve. They stay busy because stillness feels wrong. They find tasks because tasks have always been the evidence of their worth. They say "I'm fine" on the phone because the alternative, saying something real, asking for something, requires a kind of vulnerability that was never part of how they understood themselves. When a person's identity has been built almost entirely around a role, losing that role or watching it shrink can make the ground beneath them feel less stable. This is not weakness. It is what happens when the thing that gave your life its shape quietly steps back, and nobody around you has noticed the change because you have not let them see it. And that invisibility is partly by design. The same generation that learned to put their needs last also learned not to discuss the experience of doing so. In many households of that era, strength was demonstrated through action, not language. Feelings were managed privately. Vulnerability was not something you brought to the table, especially if you were the one who set it. So the baby boomer, now sitting at a quieter life, feeling something they cannot quite name, is also the one with no practiced habit of putting that feeling into words. They know how to fix things, they know how to keep going. Sitting still long enough to ask what they actually feel is a different skill entirely, one that was never required of them, and so was never developed. The invisible expectation that built up over decades, that someone would eventually notice the constancy of the giving, the years of being last, is rarely spoken. That expectation lives below the surface of awareness entirely. But it is there, and when it goes unmet, the result is not bitterness exactly, it is a specific kind of quiet, the quiet of someone waiting to be seen by people who stopped looking because the person in front of them seemed to need nothing at all. The strength was too convincing, the "I'm fine" was too practiced. The last seat at the table was taken so consistently for so many years that it simply became where they belonged. Here is what deserves to be said plainly. The baby boomers who spent their lives being last in line were not wrong to do it. They were responding to real circumstances with real values. The care was real. The strength was real. The families held together. The work shown up for. The quiet competence that kept everything running. All of it mattered, and none of it should be reduced to a wound. But a value shaped by one set of circumstances does not automatically fit every set of circumstances that follows. What made someone indispensable at 40 can make them invisible at 70 if the pattern never found a reason to shift. What served them in a household that needed constant managing can quietly isolate them in a life that now needs something different, the willingness to receive, to rest, to say "I need something" without immediately taking it back. The person who was always last to sit down deserves at some point to sit down first, not as a reward, not as payment for years of service, simply because the table was always theirs too. It was never only for the people they were feeding. That shift does not require a dramatic decision. It begins with something much smaller. Noticing the moment when "I'm fine" or "I've got it" arrives before any actual check has been done. Pausing there, asking honestly whether it is true this time. The person who spent decades ensuring everyone else was cared for is also a person, and people, including them, are allowed to need things. If something in this video felt familiar, if it named something you have been carrying without quite finding the words for it, leave a comment below, not to analyze or debate, just to say what it brought up. These tend to be the most honest conversations in this space, and your experience is worth saying out loud. If these conversations matter to you, subscribe to this channel. A new video every week, not to tell you who you are, but to offer a different way of seeing the patterns you may have been living inside so long they stopped being visible. And if this video said something you have been trying to say for a long time, share it with someone who might need to hear it. The question worth sitting with this week: how long has it been since someone asked what you needed, and you actually answered honestly?